Hey, it's been a while, how are you? On the last Iceberg, we covered levels 1 and 2, which are the most well-known of what I would consider to be the darkest of posts on Reddit. This time around, we're going to be covering levels 3 and 4, but I must say, this time it gets much darker, much quicker, and I suggest sticking around until the end of the video to see what I mean. Just in case for some reason you haven't seen the first video, an iceberg chart is a listing system in which we have the top of the iceberg, which symbolizes the most well-known things, and the bottom of the iceberg, which is underneath it, that contains the most obscure and oftentimes disturbing entries that many people aren't even aware of. You need to be aware, though, because, like I said, these stories get kind of hecked. So, grab your water or whatever, and let's begin. Level 5. Better hoagie down. And this is probably the weirdest post on this entire iceberg, and I mean all 3 videos, and that's saying something. I'm not going to spoil anything beforehand, so let's just get into it. A user posted, "Me, 32M, with my wife, 30F of 6 years. I believe she's gaslighting me and I don't know what to do. First and foremost, yes, I know this sounds ridiculous. This will probably get downvoted as a troll post, but I sincerely don't know where to turn. I've never experienced anything like this. Little background. My wife has always been sort of a jokester. She has a great poker face, and I'm fairly gullible, so she'll feed me little innocuous lies pretty frequently and delights when I fall for them. But she's never kept the deception going for more than a day. She also got really into weird Twitter a few months ago, and her sense of humor has become pretty inscrutable and opaque to me. But until very recently, I've just sort of considered it an endearing quirk. So anyway, for Christmas my in-laws got us all a Battlestar Galactica thing on DVD. They were always raving about it and neither of us had watched it. I had to leave for a business trip on the 30th and my wife was sick, so we ended up just marathoning the whole thing before I left. Without giving too much away, the ending is a little heavy on the religious angle. I liked it, but my wife thought that it ruined the entire show. I know general consensus is it's a bit of a letdown, but I frankly felt that it was pretty consistent with what the show had been building up to the whole time. My wife couldn't believe that I didn't feel the same way she did. I wouldn't quite describe her as livid, but she was genuinely mad. I figured this was partially a reaction from her just being fed up from being sick for over a week, but it was so out of character for her. We barely ever fought, and this was over something so trivial. She called me a moron and ended up tossing and turning after we went to bed. And eventually she left the bed entirely to sleep on the couch. When I got up in the morning to head to the airport, she was still fast asleep, and when I gently shook her to say goodbye, she barely roused and didn't even respond when I told her I loved her. Fast forward to Monday. I get back from the trip, friend picks me up from the airport because wife has a class at the gym that she couldn't miss, according to her, and we'd been texting while I was gone. She'd apologized for being weird about things, and I thought that everything was going to go back to normal, but I found it a bit odd that she couldn't skip a gym session to pick me up. I couldn't sleep on the plane, so I hit the hay when I got home. When I woke up, she was already awake and busy in the kitchen, which is bizarre since she doesn't work and usually doesn't even wake up until 10-ish. I commented on this and hugged her and said, "Morning," and she basically responded with little grunts. I was about to leave when she handed me a brown bag lunch. She's never done this before, and said to me, "It's cold out there. Better hoagie down." I grabbed the bag and just said, "What?" And she walked to the bathroom and slammed the door. I was going to be late for a meeting, so I couldn't stick around and try to make sense of what exactly was happening. And after I got out, I texted her frantically, trying to figure things out, but she kept replying to me like it had never happened, and that everything was fine, she loved me, and she asked me to stop being so weird. When I got home, it was more of the same. I assumed it must have just been one of her strange jokes, and decided to just leave it. Every morning this week, same exact thing. Wife is awake, won't speak to me, hands me a brown bag lunch and says, "It's cold out there. Better hoagie down." Walks to the bathroom and slams the door. This morning I had enough and yelled at her through the door. pleaded with her to stop, but she didn't say a word. Every night it's been the same thing. It didn't happen. What are you talking about? You're being crazy. None of this is happening. She's been legitimately angry with me, and for the last few nights we haven't even been sleeping together. I heard her talking to her mother, I think, about this over the phone. I seriously have no idea what to do. I brought up couples counseling and she was incredulous. Is this some weird Twitter thing or new meme that I don't know about? Even if it is, she's taken this way too far. I don't know how I'm going to be able to spend a weekend at home with her. Does anyone have any advice? Edit. Thanks for the help, everyone. I've been up all night worrying, and I'm going to finally try to get some sleep. I'm taking the day off of work, and I'm going to try to also have a serious discussion with my wife and her parents and get a hold of a psychiatrist when I wake up. I'll keep everyone posted. Update. Woke up an hour ago with a huge headache. I went to the fridge to get a protein smoothie and saw that it had been cleared of what little food we had in there. My wife wasn't in the house. I got dressed and went to the door with the intent of going to get some food and saw a brown paper bag with "It's cold out there, better hoagie down" written in cursive taped to the door. I opened the bag and there was a can of ginger ale in it. I went outside and her car was still there, but as far as I could tell, she took the wallet, keys, coat, and everything, and we live about 5 minutes outside of a nice town. She likes to take long walks, so I'm assuming that that's where she went. This has officially gone way too far. I'm gonna wait an hour and see if she comes home, or if she and her parents return my calls. But if not, I'm driving to her parents to hopefully make sense of the situation myself, bringing the video of her in the bag. I'll update tonight, hopefully. Update 2. No sign of her. I got a call from her parents that it was just the sounds of them arguing in the background, and then I hung up after about 30 seconds. I have no idea what that was about. But I'm driving there now. Update 3. I made a second update that was deleted because people were getting rowdy in the comments. People keep messaging me for the text, so here you go. The general consensus seemed to be split between me lying and this being a strange story. I guess, decide for yourself. I'm currently sedated, but I wanted to post this update because I didn't know when I'll have a chance to next. The short of it was that my wife wasn't at fault here. I was. I've gotten into the habit of taking Benadryl to help me sleep through the night. My wife snores and I'm allergic to her cats, so it makes sense, and over time I've ended up taking more and more to the point that some nights I'll take 5 or 6 if I'm having trouble breathing. I know this is probably really stupid, and it bit me in the ass. When I got home from the airport, all 3 of my wife's cats were on the bed. I searched the nightstand for some Benadryl and couldn't find any. I looked in my wife's drawer and found a bottle of hers. She's also allergic to her cats, go figure, but gets allergy shots. It turns out the Benadryl bottle was actually where she was keeping her old Seroquel. Both are pink, so I didn't give it a second thought. I popped 6. I went to sleep after that. This is, apparently, where everything unraveled. Fast forward to my driving to her parents' house. I started feeling incredibly dizzy about an hour out and pulled over. I sat in the car for a while, but the feeling didn't go away, so I decided to get a motel and confront them the next day. I took a handful of Seroquel and went to sleep. I got up today in this weird mania. I got to her parents' place at 9-ish. Her car was there, which didn't make any sense. I rang the doorbell and her father opened the door. He was surprised to see me. I was sweating heavily and having a hard time speaking. My father-in-law has always been exceptionally kind to me, and he was sort of straddling the line between concern and terror. I didn't understand what was going on. I started crying. I brought out the paper bag and tried to explain. I pulled out my phone to show him the video. My wife ran to the door with this pained expression on her face and asked me what I was doing, pleading with me to calm down. My in-law said that I'd been terrorizing his daughter and he had no idea why I would do this. I didn't understand. She pulled out her phone and showed me a video. It was me, banging on the bathroom door and screaming at her to come out. She'd clearly taken it from behind the couch in the living room. She then showed me another of me just standing at the door before work and staring at nothing. She showed me a video of my behavior after I came home from work, and I was being a lot more aggressive and much less cogent than I remembered. Apparently she had left home Tuesday night. I was alone in the house for 2 days. I pulled up the video on my phone, or tried to, but I couldn't find it. All I found were 16 odd pictures of the ground and my feet in quick succession. It was right around that point that I started experiencing this crippling dizziness and this feeling that I can't quite describe as nauseous, but it felt like I couldn't sit still. I was shaking and I felt like no direction was up. The doctors told me this was called akathisia. Apparently, someone called an ambulance because I couldn't sit still and said I thought I was dying. At the hospital, I was barely able to talk and I couldn't concentrate and just wanted to sleep. They apparently pumped me full of Ativan and I slept for 5 or 6 hours. When I came to, they started asking me a ton of questions. Once we got to medications I may have taken, I mentioned the Benadryl and my wife realized what had happened and explained about the Seroquel. They're not entirely sure, but at this point their best guess is the Seroquel either put me into some manic state or triggered some underlying schizophrenia or something. I don't know. They don't really know how to explain the delusions and hallucinations right now, but it's the best they've got at the moment. They asked if anyone in my family had a history of mental illness, and I responded that I didn't know. My parents are pretty old, and I don't know much about my grandparents. The dizziness started to roll over me again, and they gave me more Ativan, and I went back to sleep. While I was out, my wife contacted my parents. Apparently, my grandfather had a mean temper and suffered delusions from time to time, rambling about things that didn't make any sense and waking up at weird hours to do God knows what. He never got a diagnosis and died fairly young, but my mother and family think that it might have been schizophrenia. So, maybe something, maybe nothing. Who knows? But right now, I'm sitting in the hospital. The doctor and my wife are throwing around a number of ideas. I'm going to see a psychiatrist who's going to make a determination about what the next step should be, for certain. And my wife is rightfully frightened of being around me in my current state, and while she doesn't appear to be mad at me, she says that she would rather my brother look after me until I can get a proper diagnosis and get prescribed some medications. I have no idea where I came up with the phrase, hoagie down. I was listening to a radio show that mentions hoagies in Philly a lot. The best show, formerly of WFMU. I got the box set for Christmas. Maybe that's where I got it. But they never used that phrase specifically. I don't know. I honestly have no idea. But I guess I just want to thank everyone who turned out to help. Sorry if this ended up getting something of a time waste or anticlimactic or whatever, but turns out I'm going crazy and currently getting treatment. Very sorry if I wasted everyone's time. Okay, so I'm wondering if maybe the wife was given Seroquel as a sleeping medication or something, because they didn't mention if the wife had any sort of delusions, but Seroquel is basically an atypical antipsychotic, and people who have like schizophrenic delusions take it. So the thing is, people also use it as a sleeping aid, which it's not supposed to be used for because it can cause tardive dyskinesia, which is basically where you twitch around uncontrollably. I don't know, that just seems bizarre. Better hoagie down sounds like something Joel from Vinesauce would say. Better hoagie down. I don't know. I can't do a Joel from Vinesauce impression. Accidentally killed 7 people. This story taps into the paranoia of accidents. At any time, anyone could be a little bit careless, and it could result in the death of someone else. It reminds me of those work safety commercials where people would mess something up and die in horrible ways. I remember one where a woman was in a restaurant and someone slipped or something, and they accidentally dropped a pot of boiling water and her face was just mangled. I believe they were a Canadian exclusive thing. Thank God for that. But they were really graphic. If anyone else has seen these, let me know in the comments, but they were kind of traumatizing. I believe they actually aired on TV too. Anyway, this post was on the Confessions subreddit, and it said, I accidentally killed 7 people. I put a rag into a new water heater exhaust to keep debris out and installed it in a rental. I get a call a week later. There's been an accident. I show up and there's a ton of EMS and police. They ask me where the gas shutoff is, and I go down to shut the gas off and see the end of the rag I forgot, sticking out of the top of the heater. I rip the rag out, shut the gas off, and head upstairs. And I'm told there that all the tenants were dead. I drink all day now, and sleep. It's killing me from the inside every single day, but if I say anything, my family's ruined. We have a bunch of rental properties, and we'd be shut down. OP, sister. From the title alone, you might think this is some hardened criminal or something, some evil person. But the actual story is pretty depressing and not what you might think by the title. The user posted, "First of all, police already know. Whole town knows. It was on the news. Anyways, here goes. 17 years ago, I was 5 years old. My sister was 2.5. We'd bathed together many times, mostly with supervision, but sometimes not. My mother was a low-income single parent with a new baby and 2 jobs. Sometimes she needed to quickly run off and take care of the baby. Yeah, it was irresponsible to leave kids in the bath alone, but 9,999 times out of 10,000 would be just fine. It was only ever for a couple minutes, and hindsight is 20/20. Plus, who really expects their kid to drown their sibling if you turn away for a few minutes? I knew that I had to not let her head go into the water. My mother had carefully explained that to me, and told me that she wasn't to get her head or face in the water because she could drown, and that meant that she'd be gone forever. Well, on this day 17 years ago, we were bathing as normal, only today I was really mad at my sister because she ripped up a book I liked. Our mother was cooking dinner. She'd come home late from work, and we were well behind schedule. I don't actually remember these details, but I've been to therapy with my mother many times, and we've discussed every minute of this night. So, I'm in the bath with my sister. I had that irrational hatred that little kids feel when they're too young to understand consequences. I wasn't thinking rationally, and I wasn't in a forgiving mood. I wasn't looking at my baby sister and seeing this little girl that I loved so much. I wasn't remembering how much we played together and how much I loved her, or how happy I was to be a big sister. At that moment, I just hated her. I remember thinking that I wished my sister would just go away so she couldn't wreck my stuff. And then I remembered that if her head went under the water, she'd be gone forever. I reached out with one hand and just held it on her head and looked at her face. I was so angry with her, and she was so stupid that she didn't even care that she'd wrecked my book, and it pissed me off. I'd be so much happier if she was gone forever. I pulled my hand and her head forward, pushing her face first into the bath. She pulled it back out and coughed and made a little sputtery whimpering sound. I saw that she was shocked and scared by what I did, and that just made me happier. She shouldn't have wrecked my book. So I did it again. I held her head with both hands and pulled her face down into the water between my knees. She flailed about and tried to push up, but she was so little and there wasn't much she could do. In what felt like only seconds, but had to be longer, she completely stopped resisting or moving at all. It felt like I'd only held her down for about 10 seconds maximum, but it had to have been longer. I let her go, and she didn't move. I waited for her to sit up. I wanted her to look scared and upset again. It was my revenge for her breaking my stuff. But of course, she never did. I lifted her up and shook her. I thought she was just pretending to hurt me, and that made me even more angry. I didn't know what I had done. Not right away. I didn't really want her gone forever. I just wanted to make her sorry for wrecking my stuff. I tried opening her eyes with my fingers, and I was asking her to stop doing this. I begged her to stop doing this and to just look at me. I wasn't mad anymore. I was scared and worried. I was crying and screaming at her. I don't remember much about this part, but I'd made enough noise that her mother came running in, and I told her what I had done, and how I just totally destroyed her life. 17 years ago today, the ambulance came, but there was nothing they could do. Our mother tried to do CPR, but she didn't know how. It wasn't successful. I didn't get in any trouble over the years, but I was taken out of home for a while, and I'd see a lot of shrinks over the years. My mother got in a lot of trouble, but I'm not entirely sure how much. I told the police everything, and they treated me like I wasn't a filthy, murdering piece of shit. They were kind, and they sat with me, and I was picked up from the police station that same day by a couple who were also really nice to me. They treated me as if I was some sweet, innocent child who'd been hurt instead of some monster who killed a baby. Nobody ever treated me the way I felt I deserved. Well, except my grandparents, who won't speak to us at all. They haven't said a single word to me since that day, and they verbally abused my mother heavily at my sister's funeral. They haven't spoken to any of us since then. Even my little brother, who was just a baby, too young to even remember that he had another sister. I don't know what they said to her, but I've heard her talk about it in therapy. I moved back in with my mother a few months later and still live with her today. She won't talk to me directly about what happened. She won't tell me what happened to her afterwards, or how people treated her over this, but instead she only focuses on me. She blames herself 100% and me 0%, and she tries so hard to do what's right and look out for me and my mental health, but what I did permanently damaged her. I honestly can't think of a single time since that day that I've seen her happy or even smile at all. She always looks like she's on the edge of a breakdown, and she doesn't really look me in the face for much more than brief glimpses. She can't talk to me for very long periods of time before she starts to get quiet, and eventually I'll start to cry. Myself, like I've said, I've had to see a lot of shrinks over the years. Pretty much non-stop since it happened. I've been in and out of various places, and often for watch, and I've had quite a few not-so-serious attempts, and 4 quite serious, 2 of which I should have died. Medication isn't a reliable method, and I've caused serious internal damage finding this out the hard way. I haven't tried anything for a while, but the thoughts are consistently there. The reason I stopped is because I overheard my mother and her friend on the phone, and heard how much nearly losing another daughter was destroying her. So, being a selfish piece of shit, I was hurting her even more than I already have, and was too concerned with myself to even notice it. I still live with my mother, which has to be awful for her, but she doesn't want me to move to my own house because of my history of attempts, and doctors and therapists agree, so I'm not able to move out. I'm checked on constantly. I'm such a burden to her, and I don't know how I can stop that. I don't do drugs, drink alcohol, but I mostly think that I just didn't really have a chance in my younger years to even do that because I was being watched so closely. I've never really been able to connect with anyone long enough to start a relationship, and I've never really felt deserving of love or happiness, so I've not really had much to do with boys or even friends. My current therapist wants me to discuss this with strangers. She suggested a group therapy, but I don't want face-to-face. I don't want to look in the eyes of strangers and see pity or forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I don't want to be forgiven. I don't want to forget. What I did wasn't just okay. I would trade places with my sister in a heartbeat if I could. She was so young and small and always laughed and was so happy, and she gave the best cuddles. She used to sit next to me while we watched TV, and we'd just reach over and hug me. She laughed at my silly dances and funny voices, and she just made the whole world a happier place, and I ruined all of that because she tore a book I liked that I don't even remember the name of. And I don't want forgiveness, and I don't want absolution. I just want to get this off my chest because I don't want to have to see the way people look at me when I do. I want people to know what I did, but I don't want it to affect my mother any more than it has. She's gone through hell with this. Pop. No, Pop isn't referring to the Nyan song, unfortunately. On Ask Reddit, somebody asked the question, what is the most disgusting thing you ever witnessed firsthand? And a user responded, retired NYPD here. Worked in central Brooklyn a lot in the late 1980s and early 1990s when it was not the place it is now. It was August and hot. We got a call for a foul odor, and we pretty much know exactly what it is before we even get there. Secretly, you hold out hope that maybe something died between the walls. But it's a foolish hope. Those hopes were dashed the second we turned the corner and smelt the unforgettable odor of human corruption. The whole block stunk like a decomposing corpse. We grabbed the super to gain entry to the apartment. He only called us because, strap in, the deceased was seeping through the floor and dripping into the apartment below. We get the keys from the super because he isn't going in and entering with us. Let me stop here. I wasn't just a New York City cop. I was a Brooklyn cop. I'd seen it all, and I'd done it all, basically. So anyways, there's this procedure when someone dies at home. First, we have to verify that the person actually is dead. and then we have to take off and secure any valuables in the body. After that, we have to go through the apartment and secure any valuables there, including a will. And then we have to stay with the body and guard it until the ME comes. What happened? Allow me to elaborate. So we open the door and we're hit with a swarm of flies that were using the body as their nesting site. It was good times for them, clearly. And we're also hit with this odor that made me judge the people that just lived with it. I stepped through the dead flies to find the swollen, bloated, and, judging by the mail left over, 3-week-old corpse of, again, judging by the mail, a female that died in bed. Given the neighborhood we were in, I'm assuming that she was black. Anyway, so at this point we're thinking, well, screw the patrol guide. We go downstairs to get some fresh air, get the paperwork started, and call the detectives and the medical examiner. We tried to get into a pickup game of ball with some of the kids on the block while we were waiting, but they didn't want to play with us because, well, the stench of death was embedded in our uniforms. The medical examiner finally shows up and he just has to go up and screw with the body. Now, I mentioned the body was swollen, right? Like a balloon. Well, this happens because the internal organs rot and release their gases into the body cavity. It's also the reason why floaters start popping up in the warm weather. The gases within expand and they float to the top. Anyway, this dumbass medical examiner is examining the body and moves a leg. And now, some of the gas has a place to go in the form of a titanic dead person fart. The stench of the actual body was roses compared to this. It was just... I have no words, and God knows I'm wordy. I again nope out to the safety of the street below, dry heaving all the way. Medical examiner comes down right after me and says he'll have the morgue wagon come and pick up the body. About 2 hours later, the wagon shows up and it's 2 new guys, and I think, well, here's a baptism by fire. We go up to the apartment and they have the idea that they would just lay the body bag on the floor and use the bed sheets, which were now encrusted with dead body fluids, as a sling. I remember what happened the first time someone touched the body, and I excuse myself to the hallway. About a minute goes by and I hear screaming and gagging. Apparently, the guy that had had the head end of the body dropped his end of the sling on the floor and popped the body. Remember how I said it was like a balloon? Well, it popped like one, too. The morgue wagon drivers were drenched in bodily fluids, and the body itself was torn wide open. That was it for me. I unashamedly vomited all over. It was that bad. Anyway, those uniforms we wore that day were trashed, and the stench of death was in my pores for days. It was like there was no amount of scrubbing I could do to get it out of there. Over the years, I've had dozens of other gross stories, but this one takes the cake for me. Yeah, this is why I'm not sure I'd want to be like a medical examiner or anything like that, because just having to deal with dead bodies in that capacity just seems not very cozy, not very comfortable, you know? Creepy hideout. Here's a classic let's not meet story. Urban exploration is a really fun pastime. It's something I used to do a lot before I became afraid of hantavirus. Anyways, some people like to extend that to places that people wouldn't normally inhabit, like sewer systems or things of that nature. Which seems kind of unsafe because the sewer systems flood. But anyways, one person posted this to Let's Not Meet. This is, or was, going to be short, but the memory sprung into my mind a couple days back and I thought it would be worth sharing. I live in North Wales, United Kingdom. For anyone who's had the pleasure of visiting, it really is a beautiful place to live. Though, for an adolescent boy, it's certainly lacking in things to do. As a result, my friends and I would often find ourselves mindlessly exploring areas of countryside and coastline. Despite it being quite sparsely populated, in comparison to the closest cities, there's a dual carriageway running along the coast from Wales into England. Also, train tracks run alongside this road for most of its course, occasionally passing overhead via a small cement bridge. There was one night a few years ago when About 4 of us randomly decided to try and explore the inside of one of these bridges, as one of the group had observed a manhole cover nearby that we believed could be the entrance. On closer inspection, we discovered that several tools would be required in order to gain entry. We returned with the necessary equipment and proceeded to unbolt the cover. This had to be done stealthily, as the train track was right beside us. Not close enough to be of any danger, but definitely a sufficiently small distance to cause panic for any train driver. And panic usually means police. It wasn't long before we'd removed the heavy steel disc and started descending the ladder down into the structure. Once we had all safely reached the bottom, we decided to progress to the other side. At this point, we're totally confined into the narrow space that leads into the main area. If you're confused as to what the hell this bridge is supposed to be, you probably should be, because it was kind of peculiar. I mean, I would have never known that there was even an inside at all if it wasn't for the manhole. So, as we squeeze and crouch, at one point we even have to scrape along our bellies to the other side of the structure, there's a growing sense of claustrophobia between us. The distance from one end to the other is surprisingly long, and by the halfway point you can look down through a narrow gap and onto the motorway below. This was actually pretty cool and helped keep us calm in a strange way. At this point, apart from the mild discomfort and confinement, we were just a group of guys on an adventure. This was about to change dramatically. No more than a few meters beyond halfway, which we could tell due to the symmetry of the passageways through the bridge, one of us claimed they could see some object in the distance at the far end. Hesitantly, we agreed to investigate. Bad move. I reached the end first, and let me tell you, I've never felt the same sense of dread before or since. In front of me was a single fold-away chair positioned facing a wall. On the wall was a partially torn page from a newspaper or a magazine, showing a fully naked lady in an erotic position. The reason I don't refer to it as adult entertainment is because something about it was different. I can't put my finger on it, but it seemed more sinister than sexy, if that makes any sense. And more disturbingly, the eyes of the woman in the photo had been cut from the page, removed with precision, not just hastily ripped off. The scene that lay before us had rendered us completely speechless, and an overpowering sense of panic could be felt collectively. That was when we saw the condom. The horrendous, gut-wrenching, blood-drenched condom. Needless to say, we got out of there as fast as humanly possible, smashing our knees and shins against the sharp cement edges that lined the path of the ladder by which we'd entered. Of course, we were all praying to God that the manhole hadn't been resealed, as it was impossible to tell until you reached the ladder itself. Thankfully, the exit route was clear, and we promptly dashed away as far as our legs could carry us. User tired of people faking too. So, I'm assuming almost everyone here has had to use Benadryl before for allergies. What you might not know is that people tend to abuse Benadryl frequently because it can cause hallucinations. If you're thinking of doing this, though, I strongly advise against it. I used to have obsessive-compulsive disorder about allergies, and to this day carry an EpiPen around because I'm worried of having an allergic reaction to something. For a brief period, I would take Benadryl frequently due to perceived allergic reactions. Now, what they don't tell you about Benadryl is that it also can cause dementia and other health issues, along with the hallucinations, which... One thing I didn't mention, the hallucinations are considered to be one of the most terrifying you can have. So this entry is about a Reddit user called Tired of People Faking Too, who, sadly, is no longer with us. The reason being, their Benadryl addiction. Apparently, she was so addicted to Benadryl that she had to take 40 to 50 pills just to feel the hallucinogenic effects. In one post, she talks about having a seizure due to the Benadryl, saying, "I ended up in the hospital today after having a grand mal seizure when I was at the store. I had only taken 1.5 G, the normal amount I take usually, and I thought I was fine, but apparently I wasn't. The most screwed up thing about this is as soon as I got released, I went and took another 40 pills. Also, I knew that I was having seizures at this dose because I've woken up several times at night with me falling off my bed and hitting my bookshelf and just destroying everything in the room from convulsions. But it usually only happens within the first few hours of me tripping. This time, I had a seizure in 9 hours after taking 60 pills. She made several posts that can give you an idea of how she was feeling at the time she posted them, such as, "This is my 28th time of buying 400 DPH tablets." DPH is the actual name of Benadryl, diphenhydramine. "I've gone through a total of 112 bottles of 100 pills. I honestly don't give a shit anymore. If I die, I die. If I live, I live." It never ends. I keep on taking more and more pills, but nothing helps. I'm living in a dream state. I take the pills, then I try not to take any more, but I end up giving in to my cravings over and over again. I don't know if I'm scared of dying or of being alone forever. Short-term memory loss sucks, but that's what happens when you get addicted to DPH and abuse it for too long. I hate this stupid drug. I hate the fact that I ever even wanted to try it as a substitute for LSD. I hate that I got myself addicted. I hate that I don't want to stop. I hate that I don't care if I die or permanently damage my organs, along with a post of a dosage of 600 pills. Another post read, "How am I not dead yet? I've ingested so much. I took 52 last Saturday, 44 last Sunday, 52 Monday, 44 Wednesday, and 52 today. And I'm not talking about how many MGs I took, I'm talking about how many pills I've taken. I've been so far into my addiction that my tolerance is 44, and I can't go more than 2 days without it. I really have no clue how my heart is still beating, my lungs are still breathing, and my brain is still working. I don't know why I posted this, but I guess I posted it to vent to y'all about the struggles of abusing DPH. I'm sure some of you understand." In another post, she said, "I'm still alive, God knows how. For all the newbies and curious people that want to try DPH, I highly recommend y'all quit before you start, or quit now before it gets bad. I wish I could have broken my habit a long time ago, but the past is the past, so I can't change that. If you really want to do it, though, I gotta tell you some things that happened to me while I was taking DPH. DPH has landed me in the ICU, intubated and comatose from dangerous heart arrhythmias, severe respiratory depression, and seizures 3 times in the past year. It's caused me to have permanent short-term memory loss at the age of 20. It's very addictive, which makes it hard to stay clean from it. My tolerance has reached up to 60 pills. DPH has ruined my ability to learn at school efficiently like I used to be able to, and it's made it difficult for me to even perform at my job." In one post describing how she felt, she stated, "Well, I do want to stop, but I don't want to stop taking DPH until I can find an alternative method to cope with my life, because I take it to cope with my pain and stress and worries. I have complex PTSD and several traumatic events from my childhood. My parents died when I was very young. I was assaulted by people I trusted. I've had horrible experiences in the hospital and a lot more. I get panic attacks, disassociate, and have meltdowns when I get flashbacks or night terrors. I'm not very good at coping with it, so I used to harm myself, but now I take pills. I'm just a screwed up person." The last thing she posted was this: a picture of the dosage she intended to take. This was far, far more than the average dose. Someone commented, "Don't tell us that you're planning to take all that at once. I was hospitalized for taking 1.5 Gs, let alone 6.9 G. Please, be safe." She then left the comment, "Yes, I plan on it. I take 1.5 G regularly. I've taken 2.5 G 3 times in the past year. I took 4.5 G in April. 6.9 G may be the dose that finally frees me." People responded in the comments trying to talk her down, but sadly, their worries became a reality, as was confirmed by a user on the subreddit Dead Redditors, which said, "I am saddened to report that Tired of People Faking 2 has passed away at 20 years old after a lengthy battle with diphenhydramine addiction. In the afternoon hours of September 22nd, 2020, Tired of People Faking 2 is believed to have taken her own life via an intentional overdose of DPH. The average person will better recognize DPH under the brand name Benadryl. Benadryl is an over-the-counter drug which is commonly used at therapeutic doses as antihistamine, a sleep aid. At recreational doses, it notoriously induces a state of delirium, and users will experience realistic and oftentimes disturbing visual and auditory hallucinations. Most chronic DPH users, including Tired of People Faking 2, report they find the DPH high to be extremely dysphoric and unenjoyable, but still feel an overwhelming compulsion to continue to abuse DPH. The reason for this counterintuitive response is not medically understood. Due to a low cost and ease of access, DPH abuse is a growing problem around the world. Recent social media trends such as TikTok's Benadryl Challenge have only exacerbated this issue, particularly among young teens. I cannot stress enough just how bad DPH abuse is for the human brain. Don't be fooled by its unassuming over-the-counter status. In my opinion, chronic DPH addiction is on a comparable level of seriousness to addictions to drugs such as heroin or methamphetamine. Chronic use, especially at higher doses, is linked to a myriad of negative physical and psychological effects, including heart issues, memory issues, partial vision or hearing loss, loss of motor function, depression, brain fog, persisting hallucinations, and more. Recovering addicts will still experience these symptoms, in addition to unbearable psychological withdrawal symptoms, for months or even years after stopping all usage. Due to its relative obscurity, organized research on DPH abuse is extremely limited, but anecdotal reports suggest that some physical and psychological damage may be permanent. As difficult as the recovery process may be, death via DPH overdose is a notoriously horrible way to die. Out of respect for tired of people faking too, I will not go into detail in this post about what these overdoses are like, but needless to say, I hope this individual has finally found peace. A quote by Tired of People Faking Too was posted below this, reading, "I'm honestly quite sad how many people, especially teens, are taking this drug recreationally. I don't want anyone else to have to experience the pure agony, terror, and confusion DPH has caused me. It can't be stated enough. Don't use Benadryl if you don't have to, and even if you have allergies, you probably shouldn't use it. Honestly, it should probably be taken off the market. Better allergy medications come out since it was introduced, and the potential for abuse is too high, in my opinion. If you have problems with drug dependence, please seek help. There's no reason to give up, and you aren't a burden." I beat my stepdad into retardation. So, if the title didn't give you an idea of what happened here, the post was made under the Confessions subreddit, but the friend then deleted his account. Anyway, the post was titled, "I beat my stepdad to retardation," and read, "Starting back 4 years ago, my mom left my dad because he was beating her. She met this new guy on, get this, World of Warcraft. They had a good thing going and eventually arranged a meetup after finding out he lived only a city over from us. Fast forward a year, and he's now over at our house every day, basically living there. He worked a good job and made a nice wage, but he was really pretentious and spiteful. He began to act like he knew me and my sisters, like we were his own, and started demanding us around. My mom, being the non-confrontational woman she is, turned a blind eye. Day after day, he would come back from work and order us to clean the house and bring him everything he wanted, snacks, drinks, whatever. It went on like this for some time, and he kept getting worse and more demanding. My mom works a dead-end job and really needed the financial support from him, as well as emotional support too. So she acted like he was just perfect. My sisters and I would go to her privately and complain about how he was bossing us around, and how he wasn't even our stepdad yet, he was just some guy she was dating. She showed sorrow and empathy and assured us that she would talk to him about his behavior. Well, no. That miserable sack of shit only got worse. He would threaten to hit us and lock us in our mudroom in the basement if we didn't do exactly as we told him. On days that our mother wasn't there, as she frequently went on 12-hour shifts, he would take away our electronics and send us upstairs. My sister tried to argue back one time and he pulled her by her hair into the laundry room. She later told my other sisters and I that he grabbed her and punched her across the head hard. I was infuriated. I'm a big guy, but not athletic. I'm around 6'2", but I'm pretty husky, so my stepdad and I are pretty matched when it comes to size. Skill, though? No. He's a pencil pusher, and he couldn't connect a punch to a wall. My sister informed me of this assault, and I lost it. I called my mom and told her that he was beating us and to call the police. I went downstairs and turned the corner to the dining room and saw him on his laptop. I started yelling at him with tears in my eyes to not touch my sister again, and that he wasn't my dad. He looked over in disbelief as I'd never confronted him before. He got up and his face turned beet red. He took a step toward me and said something like, "You're never going to talk to me like that again, you hear me?" And he stepped closer and tried to grab my shirt. Before I knew what was happening, I threw the hardest punch I ever thrown, and I connected with his nose. He fell back and looked stunned, and after that he tried to lunge at me, and he got me to the ground. I can't remember how many times he punched me, but he beat my hands and the back of my head up while I was face down, blocking the back of my head. I managed to throw him off me for a bit, and he hit his head off the table. He fell on the ground with his legs still on mine, and he started making this rough snoring sound. After that, I blacked out, and all I remember from that point on is turning around and hitting him in the head multiple times. After 2 minutes of this, my sisters ran up and pulled me off of him, but he was a mess. His forehead was swollen, and he had 2 black eyes. He wasn't snoring anymore, so I thought that I killed him. I just sat back as my sisters called my mom and told her what had happened. The police started banging on the door since apparently someone called him, and my sister opened it. They got everyone away from his body and put me in handcuffs. I don't remember much after that point except for being in court with 2 witness statements from my sister stating it was self-defense. Fast forward now. I'm 17 and still live with my mom. She was devastated with me and was contemplating putting me in a home right after it all went down. And as for my stepdad, he was airlifted to ER and died on the way to the hospital but was resuscitated. He regained consciousness 2 weeks after the incident and was a new person. My mom's telling me all this because clearly I can't see him anymore. She said he talks with a lisp now and can't drink correctly. He has trouble moving his arms and legs and just sits in his brother's house all day in a special chair staring at nothing. He talks and apparently gets really excited when my mom visits him, but isn't the same anymore. I don't feel bad about it at all. He punched my 12-year-old sister and then got tenfold what he did to her. My family isn't the same anymore. And it seems like every time I come out of my room, my family's scared of me. Parasite Man. This is one that a lot of people know, but it's one of the more disgusting stories I've seen from Reddit, most definitely. I don't even really know what to say about it, but a user posted it onto the Confessions subreddit, and are there any germaphobes in here? You're probably going to love this one. Anyway, the user stated, "My obsession hurts others around me. It's also my fetish, but it goes far deeper than that. I'll try to explain the obsession the best I can by explaining how it started. Basically, when I was young, I caught pinworms. It was a strange feeling and the itch was painful. My parents took me to the doctor and I got medication to cure it. This event is what sparked my obsession. The thought that my body could be their whole world, their lifeline, almost like a planet of sorts. It was so interesting, and after that, I began researching pinworms and other parasites. And I found out that the human body already hosts parasites, such as Demodex on their eyelashes, and I wanted to know how many a human body could endure without a chance of serious health issues. And this was on my mind for years. At present time, I'm 25, but I'm very well versed in parasites as I've been studying them for over 10 years. I also purposely infect myself with non-lethal parasites because it's part of a fetish of mine, and some have worked better than others. Quite a few have given me serious diarrhea and fever as well. Others have been much more bearable. I currently have pinworms and tapeworms, various non-pathogenic protozoa, and pubic lice. I'm incredibly masochistic, so although it's uncomfortable, I do feel pleasure from it. All of these parasites mean that I need to eat a lot more than the average person, and I still look thin. And to be quite honest, it means I can enjoy so much more food than most people. I also keep multiple cultures of bedbugs and leeches in containers, and allow them to feed on my blood sometimes. Although those kinds aren't really my passion, as they don't live primarily on the human body, but I still think they're interesting nonetheless, and I find them kind of cute. Now, time for my confession. My obsession and fetish isn't just about infecting myself anymore. I also have the desire to infect others and have acted on those desires. Sometimes my parasites just pioneer to new lands on their own. My family have caught pinworms multiple times without me intentionally doing it, and other times I purposely spread them. I've infected strangers, friends, and even my own family. I know it's bad, but I just can't stop. I think I have parasites in my brain that make me feel like I need to spread them. I know how crazy that sounds, but if you knew the feeling, you'd understand. Maybe it's just a mental illness, or maybe its origin is parasitic in nature. I really don't know. All I know is it feels good when I do these things. I feel an intense need to spread my children, and when I do, I feel pleasure. I must have spread thousands of my children over the years. I sometimes sprinkle tapeworm eggs into people's drinks when I'm out at clubs. I also caught pubic lice from intercourse with a random woman I met at the same club, and I'm pretty sure I gave her pinworms, so it was like a trade. The woman wasn't even attractive, I just wanted to give her some pinworms, and instead I basically won the lottery by sleeping with her. I then spread my pubic lice to at least 4 other women, and sometimes I sprinkle worm eggs onto food and buffets whenever I visit them. I understand that you would think it's gross and messed up, and I'm basically betraying my species from my children. It's hard. I do enjoy people and have wonderful friends and family, but I also love my parasites, and my fetish is just too hard to control. I don't want to hurt anyone when I do these things, but a force beyond my understanding is driving me to do it. I think I could possibly have a parasite in my brain that hasn't yet been discovered. I'm sorry to all the people I've caused discomfort to, but it's for a cause beyond human understanding. Although this all can be justifiable, I still feel guilt. I don't want to hurt anyone. I hope that people I spread my gifts to can find it in their hearts to be a little more open-minded and not kill my children, but learn to live with them like I have instead. I'm aware how strange and disgusting others will find me if they knew. I'm aware of how immoral this seems to most people, but I assume you see me in a negative light after reading my comment. But remember, I only want what's best for my children. If you were in my shoes, truly in my shoes, I'm sure you would do the same. Well, I don't know about that. It almost reminds me of that slug story from the last Iceberg video, where apparently slug parasites can enter your brain and kill you. Maybe this guy was going around eating slugs or something, I don't know. But it's pretty disgusting, you know. Level 6. Creepy Momerl. Please, my son, he's very thick. So, moving on from bad dads, we're going to be talking about weirdo moms. So, this mom made a post on Off My Chest called, "I fantasize about eating my son," and it read, "I am a 34-year-old single mother. My son turns 18 in February. I fantasize about eating him cooked or raw almost every day. In all my life, I've never had a more satisfying, more intense, more arousing recurring fantasy. The thought of my teeth piercing his flesh, or the smell of him roasting over an open flame, or imagining the look in his eyes as I bite into one of his thighs. These things absolutely drive me wild. I think about eating my son to help me get off and have better intercourse with other people, though I can't say I blame you for making a different assumption. Eating my son is my go-to fantasy, my guaranteed to get me off piece of make-believe. That said, I have absolutely no intention of butchering and devouring him in his sleep or anything like that. For one, my fantasies are often more involved, but more than that, eating him is my fantasy, and I can distinguish fantasy from reality. Still, if my son came up to me right now and said, "Mom, I know this sounds weird, but I want to be your next meal. Would you please cook and eat me?" I absolutely would. My son doesn't know that I fantasize about eating him. He doesn't know that my mouth literally waters when I look at photos of him at the beach and see him by the pool. He doesn't know how turned on he makes me when we watch The Walking Dead together and he rests his head on my belly. I want to tell him, but I also want him to feel safe around me, not be afraid that I only see him as meat. I've worked hard to give him a comfortable and supportive and even boring life. And knowing that your mom gets off thinking about eating you would ruin that for almost anyone. And part of me still wants to tell him just so he knows everything, and so that maybe, however unlikely, he could be interested and might ask. For now, I don't plan on telling him until he's at least 18 or asks directly. I want him to go off to college and have his own experiences in life before I introduce any sexual elements into our relationship. I'd be lying if I said I didn't hope that he brought them up on his own, however. Least mentally insane Redditor. Whew. Homeless Holocaust lover. Just from that title, you know you're in for something strange. This post reads, when I was about 14, I lived in a small town. My dad was there on a temporary assignment. It was the summer of my 8th grade year, and we were about to move back to the city. I had a friend, Lawrence, who I met at the local middle school. Since my family was leaving in a couple of weeks, she let me stay over the night at Lawrence's house. Lawrence was a cool guy, but always tried to act tougher than he really was. That morning, Lawrence tells me he found a cave in the woods about 2 miles out and said, "We should go exploring." In my naive 14-year-old mind, I thought, hey, that's a great idea. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? Death. So, we go to the location. It's pretty far in the woods and very hidden. When we walk in, we discover that other people had been there before. We see beer bottles, potato chip bags, and, other convenience store junk. Then, a little further inside the cave, we stumble on this area. The area had a putrid smell and was lined with garbage. I saw a few needles. At the time, I didn't know what they were for. A grocery bag that seemed to be their portable outhouse, and a makeshift bed. Someone was living there. I know there are homeless people in the area, but I'm on high alert at this point. I saw some other stuff that I later came to realize were hex toys. A ball gag, rope, anal beads, among other things. I'm getting nervous at this point. We're in a potentially crazy homeless person's den. Then, the next thing I found was beyond creepy. It looked like a photo album. I picked up the album with one hand and held my flashlight with the other, trembling, and the first thing I saw looked like vintage photos of a prison. However, it was then that I saw a picture of a pile of bodies. I immediately realized that this was a Holocaust photo because one of them was wearing a star on his uniform, and the whole page was made up of graphic concentration camp photos. When I tried to flip the page, I noticed the next 2 pages were stuck together. Then I saw the same gooey substance, and it took me a second to register what I was seeing. It hit me like a ton of bricks. This person was getting off to these pictures. I froze in terror because I could never imagine anyone being that messed up. It's hard to describe the feeling I have, but it's like feeling evil in its purest form. I see Lawrence right behind me. Before I was worried if I told him that we need to leave that he'd call me a pussy or something, but at this point I didn't give a shit. I said, "We need to leave now." And to my surprise, he simply said, "Good idea." We noped the hell out of there and didn't stop running until we got home. I realized when we got back to his house that he had a look of pure dread on his face. I told him about the book, and he told me what he had found. It was another photo book with pictures of women gagged and bound, and there was also a picture of what looked like a child with a badly burnt face. And then he told me that he heard someone coughing and moving further down in the cave, and that's when he came over to me, and he was about to tell me that we should leave too. We told his parents later that day, and the police were called, but the only thing they found was trash. Naturally, nothing came of it. Evil Son. So this is probably the darkest entry on this iceberg, to be honest. On the Off My Chest subreddit, a user made a post titled, "I am not proud of my son," and it reads as follows. This Saturday, my son will have been sober for 18 months. He got his GED this year, and he starts a community college at the end of August. He finally has a job that I didn't get for him. Soon he's going to be moving into his own apartment, and he hasn't missed a single appointment with his therapist. He's done everything you would expect of a precocious 17-year-old who hit a rough patch after being met with a particularly bad influence. My son is 29. This is the point where I'm supposed to say that, nevertheless, I'm still proud of him for turning his life around, getting off drugs and off the streets, staying out of trouble, and acting like a responsible adult, or at least an adult who understands the meaning of the word responsible. Maybe I'll throw in a reference to the prodigal son and kill a fatted calf for him. That's certainly what's expected of me, and that's certainly what my son expects of me. He demands praise and forgiveness in a party, and me to hug him and tell him that it's all right. Demands me to tell him how proud I am that he's made something of himself. But I'm not, because he hasn't. Not in the slightest. His mother and I gave him every opportunity we could. I don't expect any praise for that, because unlike my son, I don't expect praise for doing what you're supposed to do. She and I worked hard to give him a loving, stable, comfortable, and supportive home. We were involved in his school. We introduced him to music, to the extent that any two people can. His mother was a damn good cellist, though. In sports and culture, we fed him healthy meals. We played with him. Thanks to him, we'd gotten the best shape we'd ever been in since our 20s. And we let him stumble and fall and make mistakes and get back up again. He started shoplifting at 15. The first time we caught him, we bodily dragged him back to the store, made him return the copy of Grand Theft Auto and apologize, and offered to pay for any damages. The second time we caught him, this time it was a pair of shoes, we did the same thing. The third time, we started going to family therapy. Therapy seemed to go well, and after a few sessions, the therapist asked for a few one-on-one meetings with him. After 2 of those, the police came knocking on our door. Because the little shit had concocted a story about how we were a religious cult who abused him for breakfast every Saturday, and the dumb chicken shit therapist actually believed him. Rational heads prevailed, and we fired that therapist, but our son went through 6 more in as many months, until eventually we couldn't find anyone who would take him as a patient. By 16, he was drinking. And then we found pot in his bedroom and in our bedroom. He started leaving needles, bongs, and crack pipes where he knew we'd eventually find them, just to screw with us. I know this because he told me so, in those exact words. He had his first intervention and first trip to rehab that year, and his first relapse. He had to repeat a year of high school when he was 17, which meant he was now the ringleader of a group of other young dipshits, who saw him as this totemic mentor shaman who could hook him up with whatever shit they wanted. I'm also pretty sure he started screwing one of his gang's younger sisters, who was 13 around then, but I had nothing to go on but my own instincts, so all I could do was tell her parents to keep an eye on her. No charges were ever pressed, and the family never spoke to me again after that, but they did pull both of their kids out of that school, and my son was furious at me for not daring to let him continue committing statutory. He decided to try for normal later on. While I was away, he spent an uncharacteristic night at home and on his best behavior. After his mom went to sleep, he followed her to her bedroom and took a knife with him. He crept into the room, straddled her, put the blade to her throat, and slid his other hand inside her. I don't know exactly what happened next. I know he held her down and tried to undress her. I know she fought. I know he stabbed her. I know she got away and locked herself in the bathroom before I could catch her. I hope that means she kicked him good in the balls. I know she broke the window and screamed for help. I know he ran. I know she was lucky to get an ambulance before she bled to death, and I know that he called his friends to brag and beg for a ride. I also know that the police caught him. I know that if I'd been home, or if I'd caught him, I would have killed him with my bare hands. The state tried my son as an adult. He pled out, but only after making his mother testify and smiling the whole time. She divorced me a month after his sentencing. I looked too much like him. She took her own life a year later. I would be a liar if I said I didn't blame him for her death, because I absolutely do. He was sober when he went to her room, sober when he pulled his knife out, sober when he climbed on top of her, sober when he assaulted her, sober when he stabbed her, sober when he ran, sober when he called his friends to brag, and sober when the police found him. When I made the mistake of visiting him after the divorce, he laughed and said she'd had enough of his dick that I could never satisfy her. When I made the mistake of visiting him after she took her own life, he laughed again and asked how it felt to have some prick take your bitch away. I should have killed him right there. It's to my eternal shame that I didn't. They let him out after serving 3 years. He spent the next 6 years in the streets, in and out of rehab, on and off of other people's couches, and would grace me every 6 months or so with a phone call demanding money. Eventually, I refused to talk to him unless it was to drive him back to rehab, and I stopped completely after he stole my wallet. 2 years ago, he came to my house with his aunt, his mother's sister, in tow and crocodile tears in his eyes. He pretended to apologize. I slammed the door. His aunt barges in to try to shame me into forgiving the man who assaulted my wife, caused her death, and laughed about it. He stayed outside. He slashed my tires, threw a brick through my window, and drove off in her car. His aunt had no idea that he'd taken the keys, or that he'd been armed the whole time. She blamed me. He guilted her into letting him stay with her, went to rehab and relapsed, and then went again. And here we are. In stark contrast to the ball of shit that is my son and his life, I've watched my friends and colleagues, those who will still talk to me, that is, children, go on to become doctors, lawyers, skilled tradesmen, actors and musicians, academics, entrepreneurs, and career military. I've seen a few start their own families. And even the ones who've had a rough start or who've stumbled and fallen manage to pick themselves up again or are bravely soldiering on. I have nothing but respect for them. I also note that they do not expect juice and a cookie for having a job and not getting hopped up on meth or assaulting their mothers for 18 whole months. My son's pretended to reform before. He's even convinced himself once or twice, but he always backslides, always relapses, and always finds new ways to disappoint. Always hurts other people for his own short-sighted benefit. His aunt is already at the stage where she's pretending that she must have forgotten where she put some of her knickknacks or pieces of jewelry, and already told me to screw off after I warned her what my son can, will, and has done before, and what he'll do again now that he thinks she's weak. When he screws up again, when he hurts someone else with his ceaseless bullshit, I won't be there to pick up after him. I'm through with him. And I'm through with his aunt. I can't talk to her without being overcome with rage and shame as I see the stupid hope that I used to have that my son would ever amount to anything. And I don't need any more disappointment and failure in my life. I'm not proud of my son. I'm sorry for inflicting him upon the world.